from the clicking on. So this is the February 24th meeting of the Chuckanut Community Park District. I'd like to welcome everybody here. Happy to see you. We'll go through a little bit of business here to start with, but we always start out with our mission. The mission of the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District is to ensure the entirety of the property is protected in perpetuity in public ownership with respect to its ecological, recreational, and educational functions, and to serve as a fiscal mechanism through which the district, by a tax levy, will pay the city of Bellingham for the Greenways Endowment Fund loan. Due to the COVID-19 outbreak and the governor's stay-at-home order, this meeting of the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District will be conducted online via Zoom. This meeting will be recorded. A visual and audio recording of this meeting will be posted to the CCFPD website. If your camera is on during the meeting, your voice, likeness, and surroundings will be publicly available and viewable on the CCFPD website. If you choose to speak with your camera off or by calling on a telephone only, your voice will be recorded. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome, commissioners, citizens, under Chapter 42.30 RCW, Open Public Meetings Act. CCFPD board meetings are open to the public and we welcome you. I'd like to take the roll call. John Hymas.
Here.
Hugh Beatty.
You say yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, John Brown.
Here.
And John McLaughlin, I don't believe is going to be here. His absence is excused and he made that known earlier. I think that's all the members we have. I'd like to have a look at the agenda for tonight's meeting and then entertain, once we've had a chance to review it and discuss it, a vote on accepting it for the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any corrections, deletions, additions to the agenda?
It seems to me pretty comprehensive. I suggest a motion. I will make a motion that we accept the agenda as it's sent out, as it's before everyone.
John Brown moved. Do I hear a second?
I second that.
John Hymas seconded it. All those in favor, if there's no further discussion?
Aye.
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 Aye. The agenda is adopted unanimously. The first order of business, I think, is to have an election or to actually select the slate of officers for president and clerk of our organization. This is something we do periodically, and it's time. I would entertain nominations for a slate of officers.
May I suggest something, Frank?
Sure.
I would like to suggest that you continue as president and that our dear friend John Hymas continue as the clerk. I think you've been doing a
I'll
great
second
job.
that.
I hear a railroad. Mr. Hymas, do you object to that particular proposal?
No.
Enthusiasm.
So, Bob, can we act on this tonight, or should we act on it tonight, or do we accept the slate and act on it another night? What do you recommend procedure?
I recommend you act on it tonight.
All right. I'd like a motion has been made, a proposal has been made. Do I hear a second for that? I heard a motion and a second, pardon me, to that effect. All those in favor, if there's no more discussion?
Aye. Hugh, say something.
Aye.
Okay.
Mr. Hymas?
Aye.
Aye, I'll vote aye. So unanimously passes. So we have the same motley crew we had before. Moving along here, just a second. I think I minimized the agenda. I've got to bring it back. Come back agenda. Seconds.
Introductions.
Introductions, is there, I know that we have one guest, and that's Nicole. She came on early, so Oliver from the City Parks Department is here as our guest, and we look forward to our discussion with her. And I believe Lane Potter, you're here too, right? Yeah, there's Lane.
There's Lane.
both from
Good
the
to see you.
parks. Good to see you too.
John
there
Blethen is with us.
John Blethen, our person that helps coordinate with John Hymas with the Parks Advisory Board. Welcome, John. And would any of the other people, there are a number of other people on the call. Would anybody else like to introduce themselves?
Yeah, I'm just to say my name. I'm Vince Bachunas, former board member, former commissioner, retired, and just here because I'm interested.
Vince is an emeritus member, I think is the way
I
we would
guess you
call
could
her.
call that.
And welcome your participation and your long history of service and deep knowledge of our process. Thank you, Lisa.
Yes.
We very much appreciate it.
I could introduce Carlina Burdick.
Please do.
Carlina is a Western student senior who's going to be helping with the Fairhaven master plan for the park, Fairhaven Park master plan, as part of her senior project. And she'll be working with Lane. So she's here to listen to the overview that we're going to be providing on your agenda.
Yes, hi everyone. My name's Carlina. Thanks, Nicole, for introducing me. I'm just excited to be here and observe.
Thanks, Carlina, for being part of the process, and we look forward to working with you. Anybody else? Hearing none, why don't we move directly into that discussion of the master planning process for the Chuckanut Forest Park District? I think I know I just received and saw for the first time the document, the outline, and Nicole, do you want to explain that outline for us? You want to walk through it?
What I'm going to do is just briefly introduce the project. This project has been in the coming for quite some time, and we budgeted in this biennium to complete the Fairhaven Park and Chuckanut Community Forest Master Plan. It's one document. We've outlined kind of there's a lot of different ways you can do master plans, and this one's going to be unique, like all of our master plans. Each park is unique and each plan is unique. This is an already pretty fully developed park, the Fairhaven Park side of it, but we've never actually documented it in a plan document before. So we want to do that, and then we want to incorporate it as kind of a subsection of the plan, the Chuckanut Community Forest plan as well. So it'll all be part of the Fairhaven Park master plan process, which I'm going to turn over to Lane to introduce. So it's a budgeted, it's on our work program. Our goal is to get it done this year. And we are here to get some feedback on our outline. We've been to Greenways and we've been to Park Board with this outline. It's gotten a little more juicy in different parts. It's had some new things added. I'll just let Lane kind of take it away. I think she's going to share her screen, or if you all have it in front of you, we could not share the screen, whatever your preference is.
Yeah, let me know what works best.
I could ask a question first. I must admit I was shocked at the proposal that this would be a Fairhaven Park master planning process and not a master plan for the community forest. My understanding of our agreement with the city was there would be a master planning process for the community forest. And the purposes of a park and a community forest with the conservation intent of our basic mission would seem an odd combination to include those two together. And I was hoping we'd have some discussion about that at the beginning before we launch into the details. I was just wondering what was the logic of mixing two very, very different things together.
Well, they've already been mixed. That's the logic. It appears in our budget since I've been at Parks as a Fairhaven Park master plan on the capital plan. The Chuckanut Community Forest was incorporated into the Fairhaven Park boundary when it was purchased back some many years when it was actually purchased. We made it part of Fairhaven Park, and so
Excuse me, may I stop you right there? Is that
Mhm.
true, Mr. Carmichael? It seems to me that in negotiating this entire arrangement, we never agreed to any such thing. In the interlocal agreement and the conservation easement, it was never incorporated into any considerations regarding Fairhaven Park.
So I think what Nicole is speaking to, if I understood what she said, was something that the city did when they purchased the property, which would have been before we negotiated the interlocal agreement. That was not a topic of our discussions in the interlocal agreement or the conservation easement. It just wasn't discussed. I don't remember it unless you remember it, John. I would hazard to say that we just flat didn't talk about that idea. So it is a new idea. I think Frank's right about that. Well, maybe not new to the city, but I think it's new to the park district. I don't
Miss
think-
Oliver, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but
Yeah,
please go
I
ahead.
hear you. I guess what I'd like to try and do is get past that. It kind of happened. And so what we have to do, it's been tracked as the acreage in Fairhaven Park now in our comprehensive plan, our approved documents, the pro plan. It's been part of that. But what I really want to do is make it its own unique plan. It needs a plan, and that's what we're doing. The most planning part of this whole project is about the Chuckanut Community Forest. But the only way to get into the forest, the only way we're going to serve this forest, the only way we're going to contemplate any improvements we want to do is to acknowledge the fact that the amenities to serve that park are part of to serve the forest is in Fairhaven Park. So that's why it makes sense from a planning perspective to document what's existing and then focus our visioning goals, incorporate the goals from the conservation easement and bring all that stuff so that it's in perpetuity. That's our vision for how we're going to address this. It's going to be I kind of see it as, well, we don't really have another comparison but I do see this project being a really good template for how we're going to address our newest acquisition, which is the Bakerview Park that's the former Bakerview Nursery site, which also will have a neighborhood park, not as big as Fairhaven Park, but a neighborhood park with an adjacent forest that may have very different uses and goals and things, intentions. So if we can, I know that this is upsetting. I know you're worried about the naming. I know you're worried about the how we're going to move from a park district to this master plan. And we're very well aware of your concerns. We want to talk about the naming. We want to go through all of that. I'm just telling you that right now, it's all one thing. In our system, it is. And I don't know how that happened. It happened before me.
And I'd say that I had that discussion with your predecessor, and what she told me was that in fact it is a different facility, and the naming process, that there was actually a requirement that they not name it until after the master planning was done. That would have precluded including it as part of Fairhaven Park. That's what we discussed and what she told me.
Frank, I wonder if at this point we
email to that effect, in fact, in writing.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but that's not what happened. It's in it. It is inside. All the acres of Chuckanut Community Forest are inside the boundary of Fairhaven Park right now. So we need to, if what we need to do is separate that out as part of this planning process, then maybe that's one of the things that we discuss. But I'm just telling you that where we're starting out from, we need to do a master plan, but the official boundary of Fairhaven Park encompasses the Chuckanut Community Forest right now.
Nicole, could you spend just a minute or two? Because I think just my sense from the board is they'd like to understand how that happened. Do you know how it happened that it got lumped in with Fairhaven Park?
I was told that when we bought it, the park district was going to be in, to steward the conservation easement, to manage the repayment of the bond, and that I don't know exactly how it happened, except that the way when we bring properties into our system, we put them into the GIS system. We acknowledge it's all city-owned property. We create parcels, and the parcel and the way the park defines its parcels, there's a couple different ways. We have the historical parcel layer, but the way we display it and the way we account for it and the way we name it and track it and sign it and it's one big piece in City IQ in our GIS layer. And it's one line item in our park plan that shows our existing facility. It's counted that all the acreage is inside Fairhaven Park in the approved plan. And that was in there when I got here in 2016. It was in that approved plan at that time.
Yeah, I believe you. I'm sure you're right. I think the confusion is, it goes back to when we were negotiating the interlocal agreement with James King. I don't think James ever, and I don't know if it was him or Leslie after him, but I don't think we were told, well, I know we weren't told that we would become part of Fairhaven Park. The interlocal agreement was drafted specifically to refer to the Chuckanut property, and it says the master plan is for the Chuckanut property, doesn't say anything about Fairhaven Park. And that's what our interlocal agreement says with the city. So somehow, some way, the city went off on its own and made some of those decisions without telling the park district, which I know that's not your doing. You're kind of stepping into it. But I think that's where some of the, I almost want to say a little bit of mistrust is coming from the park district. But not for you, but I think it's just,
No.
It's a touchy subject.
It's definitely a touchy subject. And I have exchanged emails with another attorney in your office, Bob.
Catherine, she works
yeah.
for me.
And that went back and forth with Janice Bolitnikoff, Lane's predecessor, I believe, when we were talking about this a couple of years ago. So we have two options moving forward. And I got to tell you, I have to go to another meeting at 7 o'clock. So what I'd really like to do is table this conversation. And I acknowledge that it's confusing. It's built mistrust. I think it's more of a way to account for it when we didn't have a true name, plan, anything yet, but we needed to put it somewhere and call it something and count it and account for the acreage and be able to maintain it. We needed to be able to create work orders for our staff against it to maintain it. We couldn't just be a blob in space. We do everything in GIS now. So I think it's more of it was a placeholder. Why don't we call it a placeholder? Does that sound better? As a placeholder, it was incorporated into the boundary while we waited for this master planning process to move forward. And that's what we're doing. And we can decide as part of this plan how we want that to appear in our official, because it doesn't have a plan, it doesn't have anything else to define it. So does that?
I have a question. Is Hoag's Pond part of your Fairhaven Park plan?
No.
How come? It has a GIS.
I haven't talked about the boundary yet. So I have an idea, you guys. Can we just let James go through the outline, and then we can go back and answer some questions, but just let's go over the outline. And because the boundary is our first decision, we have to decide.
Well,
that's going to be part of the
rationale doesn't hold up if the Hoag's Pond's not part of Fairhaven Park because you purchased that long ago.
Well, that's one thing we talked about. Should we include the trailhead at Fairhaven Parkway? That's another access point. Should we include the interurban trail that runs all the way around the edge of it and heads over to Arroyo? We could do a master plan for that whole area, name the pieces inside of it, and have it one document that would be our go-to document for how we're going to access and how things may or may not change over time, what things we might consider. It really is we're really at the very beginning. And that's one of our first questions is the boundary, Hugh.
So actually, we don't feel like we're at the very beginning. We feel like we're well into it, almost 10 years into it. And I actually had discussions with Leslie Bryson about this specific issue, and she did not represent it the way you have. Now, perhaps I misunderstood. And I'm not saying you're being untrue. I'm just saying that your predecessor didn't explain it the way you're explaining it. Because when we noticed that Fairhaven Park, that name had been applied to Chuckanut Community Forest, I called her, I discussed it with her. She told me that it was an unnamed parcel and that it would be named as part of the master planning process. And that was because that's required in the process that you guys have in parks, that you do not name things until it goes through the master planning process. And I actually have an email from her about that specific
She
issue.
told me that too, but
And-
that's also what Nicole is saying. Nicole is saying that it is unnamed and to be named. I wonder if we can,
No, she's saying it's named.
no, she's not saying it's named, Frank. Nicole, clarify that,
yes, she
please.
is.
You guys, it is, if you look at the map of the city parks and you look at Fairhaven Park, it includes the forest right now.
And
But
that is
that
why I
doesn't-
called her in the first place.
And I'm just telling you that that's where we're starting from. So we need to do the master planning process. And if we want to extricate the forest and make it its own separate thing, then let's do that. I have no problem with that. Okay.
But it's more than a name, Nicole. The fact is, the easement that we hold in trust for the people that paid millions of dollars is for the preservation of that land, not to make it into a park. And that's a trust that the public gave us millions of dollars to execute. It is not something we take lightly. Calling it a park is not the right thing to do. It needs to be respected. This is not something the city just bought. This is a partnership with us. And to have decisions made unilaterally doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel right to me.
I don't
And
feel
so-
that I can't associate myself completely with the sense of your remarks. I think that we ought to let Nicole and Lane go ahead with what they have and to table this. That's my opinion. I don't mean to cut in on you, Frank, but they only have so much time.
That's fine. I just want the record to clearly show that this is not the beginning of the process for us. We've had a process ongoing for some time. We've engaged in extensive efforts to begin that master planning process ourselves. With tremendous volunteer effort, with public hearings, with an extensive process. I want to make sure that that process is respected. So I'm happy.
Me too.
Oliver,
Me too.
Nicole, please go ahead and carry on. But you need to know it's not the way I think our board sees it and not the way the public sees it.
So let's do it right, Frank. I don't want to do it wrong. That's why we're here. Okay. I totally respect all of the work that you've done as a district. We want to capture, we don't want any of that to go to waste. We have a baseline that is astounding. The planning work that you've done and the effort that the community did to protect this property and the whole work of the conservation district, that's what this planning process gets to document in perpetuity. And we can decide through that public process how we're gonna call it, how we're gonna access it. And if we want to extricate it from the Fairhaven Park boundary, this planning process will allow us to do that.
Mm.
And if we want to start by, if that's the direction you give us right from the get-go, then that's what we'll do. That's why we're here. Okay, I want to be very respectful of you guys. I'm not
Thank
trying
you.
to shove anything
Thank you,
anywhere.
Nicole.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to get this done before your board, before the, it's this year we
can't
finally
go
got
away
here.
until it is done, so that's fine. No worries.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Lane.
Thanks, Nicole. Would it be easier for you all if I share the outline on the screen, or do you have a copy in front of you, let me know what would be best.
I have a copy. I think it would be helpful for you to put it on the screen if you can, Lane.
I have a copy already. I don't need it on the screen.
Well, but anybody else that's listening, and in the future, I think we better have it on the screen so that we can all share it. And anybody that accesses this later on would be able to see what we're talking about.
All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the outline that we've started putting together, and thank you, Robin, for sending it out to the group in advance. I was hoping that you all would have a moment just to go through, because I think this is, as Nicole mentioned, our starting draft of the outline of all the various items that we're trying to document, questions we'd like to answer, goals, outcomes, deliverables for the master plan. And so this is really your opportunity to give us feedback in terms of maybe things we missed, things that need to be changed. So please feel free. I think what I'll do is just go through it. I'm not going to hit on every single item. It's pretty detailed. And then I think after I go through the outline, then we can go back and hit on any items that you have specific questions on. So this is a perfect segue. The first question that we would like to answer is, what is the boundary of this master plan? So you can see there's 3 different options. What are we looking at? Is it everything that's in GIS as Fairhaven Park? Is it looking at all the surrounding areas of access, getting to the park? So what is that boundary? And I don't know that we have to come away with a clear answer of that this evening, but I hope to get some input from this group, and we will also get input from the public during the public process that's associated with the master plan. And so starting to go through and look at some of the process for this planning, and looking at how we'll gather input and what our timeline looks like. We are hoping to form a small group to act as a stakeholder group, a steering committee. And we would like to invite someone from this group, if you're interested in joining, whether there's more than one of you that's interested in joining, that's great. We're hoping to gather some representatives, hopefully from Park Board or Greenways, and then possibly some other user groups, whether it's Recreation Northwest or someone from the biking community, just to get some user group input. And then looking at our timeline, this is, you'll see the Forest District as item 2. So bringing this to the Park District Board and talking about various components of the plan, seeing who's interested in joining for the steering committee. And then looking forward, some of the milestones that we need to include as part of this process are public meetings. So gathering public input, doing community outreach and engagement, and then with a goal of finishing this master plan by the end of the year. You'll see some of those milestones in terms of a September presentation to you all of kind of a draft final master plan, the October presentation to the Parks Board, and hopefully presenting to City Council in November. So that's the goal right now. Is that reaction because it's ambitious?
I think it's wonderful. Keep going.
Thanks. So looking forward, we have budgeted $25,000 for this master plan. And so these are the different areas in which Nicole and I are thinking possibly hiring a third party or a consultant could be helpful. It's also possible, with a lot of the amazing baseline material and inventories that you all have done historically, we already have a lot of great data and background documents and guiding information. So the consultant needs for this park, as Nicole mentioned, are a little bit unique and different from some of our master plans where we're just starting from scratch. So those are some possible consultant needs. So internally, what Nicole and I have just started to do is really dig into what we have in the city in our files. So what do we have with all the history of this property surround whatever that boundary ends up being? What do we have with regards to survey, all the different survey elements. What do we have in terms of historical photos, any aerial comparisons? And then looking at all the trail planning work that's been done with this group, Recreation Northwest, city staff, that trail plan will ultimately help inform and guide the master plan as well. And it's great that we've already had so many conversations about that to start that process. And then some other needs that will probably be done internally with staff are some drafting, putting together maps, and then ensuring that the vision, goals, and policies are in line with all the provisions from the conservation easement, from the interlocal. I think I'll stop before we get into what we're going to document. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the process before we get into what we'll be documenting?
I guess my question is, you're aware from reading the interlocal agreement, there are very specific requirements of conservation and preservation as the primary goals of the community forest. They seem pretty incompatible with parks in terms of the kinds of facilities one might build, the kinds of activities that would be going on. I just wondered, how are you going to reconcile those very different demands on the physical space?
Yeah, well, I think
what's the problem? Why do that together at a not at the level we were talking earlier, but at a functional level?
Yeah, well, I think, to be honest, the conservation easement and the actual acreage that's encumbered by the conservation easement, there's very clear restrictions on what can and cannot happen. So section 4 and 5 of the conservation easement clearly outline prohibited uses and allowed uses. So I think the conservation easement is in perpetuity, and we're really hoping to wrap those goals and those conservation values into this document. But at no point are we attempting to amend the conservation easement or change what you all have, worked so hard to make sure can and cannot happen on this property. So all those conservation values will definitely be a part of this master plan document, and we will respect those sections of the conservation easement that are very clear. They're very detailed. There's even sections of the conservation easement that say, you can't widen a trail till the master plan allows for widening of that trail. So there are some provisions in the conservation easement that need a master plan to even really hold teeth. So I think this document is really important to complement the conservation easement, but in no way override it or amend it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, I'll just add some of what I heard was that some of the improvements that might be contemplated that could be used to provide amenities for people who are using the forest or to enhance people who are using the forest. There may be room in Fairhaven Park to do that kind of thing. That's what I heard. Some notions of, whether we need more, if we need more restrooms, or we need, if we're going to do some sort of I heard something a long time ago, some sort of like a pump track or something was a concept, and that where that would fit to help, where that would fit would be within Fairhaven Park, not within the forest. So that's how that interplay is so important, because the restrooms that serve Fairhaven Forest, the parking, the access is all not in the forest itself, but we have to plan for those improvements and how people are going to get in, and where we're going to do improvements on the edges to help provide parking for people and amenities, and where we want to not have that stuff. So that's why the edges and the access and the amenities are important. And we were just going to put it all in one, what's there right now at Fairhaven Park. A lot of our master plans are literally like a one or two page document. The Chuckanut Forest part is going to be a much more expansive, based on the baseline study, the habitat goals, the conservation easement. That's all going to be incorporated into that master plan, and those references and those long-term goals and intentions and the history. The Fairhaven Park master, the park, the developed park part is more of, here's what's here, if that makes sense. And there's some things that would be good for the community to weigh in on also within the park, the developed park side, as far as priorities for improvements. And there's definitely some things to be done in there.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a
Yes.
great transition into what are we going to document. And so this is where you'll see two kind of different things that we'll be documenting. And so, when you look at amenities, tennis courts, restrooms, playgrounds, pavilions, those are things that are more in a developed park. And so those will clearly be documented versus some of the items you see below, habitat, species, more of a comprehensive site inventory with all these different canopy cover, erosion, water bodies, all these ecosystem services and natural resources that are present on site. So I kind of see two very different groups of things being documented in this process. We're looking at one more of the recreational side and the built park, and then looking at more of the conservation values, and not rewriting a conservation easement, of making sure that the values in the conservation easement are captured. There's already wonderful work in the baseline conditions report, which is a great starting point for us in terms of this document. And I think that looking at some of those amenities is a perfect example of, we are going to be using this document as a guide for our future use and decisions, but the master plan needs to complement the conservation easement. So if the conservation easement has a provision that says no athletic courts within the Chuckanut Community Forest, which it does say that in the conservation easement, we're not going to, plan for athletic fields within the forest. So they'll play off of one another, and we'll be going through vetting to ensure that everything complements one another and that we're respecting the original intent of the conservation easement. So I think that's a great way to look at the baseline. And I wanted to ask this group about the 2017 baseline, because I think it's a really wonderful starting point. And I was curious if someone in this group could let me know who would be the best person to reach out to get some of the underlying reports or documentation that went into the 2017 baseline. Because I think that would be really helpful for that staff research part of the timeline that I mentioned.
Ann Isinger would be an obvious choice.
Great.
John McLaughlin may have a lot of that material. Frank may have a lot of that material. Bob Carmichael may have a lot of that material. May I ask Bob Carmichael, given what Lane has presented so far, do you have any questions regarding this, Bob?
I do. Well, first, I think I agree with you. Ann Isinger would be the one to start. She's a private consultant, so we have to be respectful of her time. But to the extent she can point you in the right direction, I would definitely start with Ann. Listening to what Lane has said and what Nicole has said, and particularly Nicole's point about the edges of the park, I do understand some logic to having the combined master planning effort with Fairhaven Park and Chuckanut Community Forest. Having said that, I think it's worth pointing out, just having been representing this board for a number of years and hearing all the things that they are concerned with and the expectations that they have for this park. My concern is that I'm not sure, even after listening to both of you, that you fully appreciate what the expectations are for the park. one of the main things that I've heard from the board is that it's really critical to look at, for example, restoration. So we're not talking just about a nature park. Okay, we're going to see what you can do and what you can't do, and say here's how wide the trails will be. It's more than that, and I think the conservation easement contemplates it's more than that. It contemplates restoring the features of the park that have been adversely impacted. There's been a lot of it. This board spent a fair amount of time looking at potential restoration options. Last fall, the board adopted a resolution identifying its restoration priorities through restoration policies for the park. I don't know if you have those. If you don't, then we should definitely get those to you. But these are things that aren't going to be in a typical park master plan. And I think that may be where some of the concern that Frank was alluding to arises from. It's not just the name. I think that the nature of the park is probably unlike any other park or any other land that the Parks Department manages in the city of Bellingham. And I know they're all unique and they all have purposes, but this one is truly unique in that while it is open to the public and we want the public to enjoy it and have access to it, one of the main focuses is preserving and restoring the natural functions of the park. And that requires work, that requires effort, that requires money. I am a little bit concerned that some of the air is going to get sucked out of the room in the master planning process towards documenting some of the things that you have in Fairhaven Park and what you need to do there. And it'll get taken away from the environmental priorities that the park district has for the Chuckanut Community Forest. And I think when we negotiated the interlocal agreement, it was understood that that master plan would be to achieve the purposes of the conservation easement, including the restoration of the natural functions. These negotiations took place together. The interlocal agreement, the conservation agreement went hand in hand. They literally were negotiated at the same time. And so when the interlocal agreement says that there will be a master plan for the park, and we even included a provision that the park district can't dissolve until that's done, the idea was that we would be the spotlight, that this forest and its conservation priorities would be what the plan was about. And I understand, Nicole, you didn't have any part of that, but somehow I think this is where Frank's coming from. That vision maybe got hijacked a little bit through some, convenience of putting these properties together and the GIS conveniences. And I totally get that. But I think it's important to understand that this particular parks district is going to want to really focus on different things and put a lot of effort into, and I'm just using restoration as one part of it. There's also the education component that goes with this. We haven't gotten as much into that yet, but I know there's a lot of interest in using this for educational opportunities. And you could really develop something pretty cool, I think, for this park if you start addressing those kinds of ideas, which are, again, they're not typical for a park master plan.
Frank, could I say something, please?
Sure, Vince, please.
In answer to Lane's question, what I'm looking at here is the baseline study draft. And I just wanted to remind you, based on what Bob just said, that the draft, when Ann Eisinger first gave it to us to proofread, contained recommendations at the end of almost every chapter. And when we negotiated with the city of Bellingham to approve the baseline report, the insistence was that all those recommendations be removed. So the final baseline report does not include the recommendations for reintroduction or restoration. you know, or future plans. It's a baseline of what's there in 2017. And all the recommendations were taken out. So Lane, I do have a copy of this draft one if you wanted to ever look at it to see what those recommendations were. But I think Ann Eisinger is your go-to person if she's willing to, you know, give us the time. And you know, that would be one of the consultants I think that we could use the budget for, paying for some of her time.
That's a great comment, Vince. Great comment. I'd forgotten about that, but we do still have some recommendations in the final baseline report. We didn't take out all of them, but there were a lot of them that were taken out just because
Yeah.
it was to say, okay, this is for another day. And I think now with the master plan, the other day is coming
Sure.
soon. And
Yeah,
so
my
we
understanding of that, Bob, was that specifically what was envisioned was that those were, not that they were bad recommendations, that isn't why they were left out, it's that the
That's right.
process needed to be taken up at this point in time. And I
That's right.
think it is the time to come back and bring those recommendations into the discussion.
Yeah, that's
Thanks
right.
for bringing it up, Vince. I really appreciate it. I think that's an excellent point. Have either of you in the Parks Department reviewed those recommendations? Nicole?
I haven't seen those. We have the final baseline, I think, Lane, right?
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
only read the final.
Yeah, they're only in the draft. The July 21, 2015 is the date on the draft. So if you guys still have that in a storage locker somewhere.
I'm sure we have it somewhere. I'm wondering if I could take a stab at something kind of crazy and take a big step back. I'm kind of feeling like we need to rethink this entirely and only focus on Chuckanut Community Forest for this master planning project and not try and include a discussion or documentation of the adjacent developed Fairhaven Park, but rather focus the entire project only on Chuckanut Community Forest, and the boundary is going to have to include how we access it. But then I think we would be able to fulfill much more of what I think you guys have always felt was the intention. I think that perhaps, you know, I mean, that's why we came to you before we talked to anyone else about this. We wanted to understand what your thoughts were, but I really do think, especially the way you just framed it, all of you, and hearing your comments, that the focus needs to be on the forest and not on the adjacent developed park. The pieces of that will come in, but people will be distracted by that, and that's not what the purpose of this project was. So I'm thinking maybe we need to narrow the boundary and not have it be the end result be. We don't need. We've gone on so far without a Fairhaven Park master plan. It's a developed park. We fix stuff when it breaks, and we'll just put that over here, and let's just do the boundary. Let's have that be the Chuckanut Forest master planning process, and we'll just shrink it and focus it, and I think it will make it a much more it'll provide us a lot more clarity, and it'll prevent scope creep, and it will I think it will be able to spend the time that we need on the things like you're talking about, Vince, those recommendations, and I think it will be easier as a public process rather than have two such divergent purposes to really focus in on just the forest. What do you think?
Are you comfortable with that yourself, Nicole?
Yeah, you know what the mantra of my work life, my entire work life at the city has always been? Do you want to hear it?
Sure.
You make it up as you go. That's I go out, I try and figure out what needs to happen and try and listen to what people are expecting and what they want and what's needed. And we figure out the process that's going to get us what we want. And I think that would, given what I'm hearing from all of you today, I think that would be a much more effective.
Do you like that, Frank?
Well, Nicole, it's interesting because when I got the draft, I immediately called Bob and said, Bob, this is really different than anything I expected, and I'm angry. I'm unhappy. And and Bob told me, he said, I know Nicole really well and I trust her. I trust her. And he's recommended I trust you too. And I didn't, but I do now. I think you're hearing exactly what our heart says. And many of us, I mean, I've been trying to protect this property for almost 28 years now. That's a long time. My son, who's now a hospitalist at the hospital here, when he was 8, he did a project towards preserving Chuckanut Ridge, studying the little creek, the Elghogs Creek that goes up there. I mean, it's been part of my family and part of my life, including weekly meetings in my home for years. So it's something that it's really deep in our hearts. And it's not just me. I mean, when I think of what Robin Dupre gave, when I think of the effort that so many people put into this, it's a pretty big deal to us. And it's emotional, you know, it's not just this, and even to hear the word park applied to it just rubs me the wrong way, you know. And it's not because I don't love parks. I love parks, and I love what you guys are doing with them, and I want to support it. But it really does have a different vision, you know. So often the county and the city give kind of lip service to the continuity, the biological continuity of the land that we inhabit, you know. And I work for the Mixtec tribe. They honestly don't think that way. They think very differently. They think of it as a piece and you can't break it up, you know, that as you look at these things, you have to look at them as a whole. And they're not perfect at what they do, but they really have a very different way of looking at land than we do. We think of it as owned and parcels and things. But I think the vision that I see is that this is not just, it is in continuity with you know, with Chuckanut Mountain and with Clark's Point and with other parcels. And, you know, we have cougars walking down the middle of some of our streets at 8 o'clock, real cougars. And that's something we're kind of proud of as a community, that we can coexist with beasts that wild. You know, the cougar killed a deer in one of my neighbor's yards and stuffed it under under the log and came back to get it the next day. And people are kind of okay with that. It's a little scary, but there are coyotes. I've got a 3-legged coyote that lives in my backyard part of the time. And he, you know, he's a cool old fart. Everybody loves him. He's actually moved up to South Hill now. It's really interesting. But I think there's a sense of desperation to preserve what we have. And part of what was a big deal about Chuckanut Ridge was that we battled and then creating a taxing district where people tax themselves to preserve land. How many times do you see that? You know, so it's something that's a bigger vision and something we care deeply about. And we really want to help you. We want to do the inventories. We want to have the trail charrettes so that we get it right. You know, we want to have it right. So it's really uplifting to me to hear you say what you just said. I think that's an important thing. I think you listen. That's really important to me. I have already called Michael Lillyquist, Gene Knutson, and the mayor already before this meeting started. I was pissed. So
Lane, may I ask?
Now I need to call him back and apologize and tell him, wait a minute, Nicole is a wonderful person who came.
Lane, you've done a great deal of work on this. Is this going to complicate? Is it going to be difficult for you to sort of break off in the way that Nicole is talking about, but the work that you've done?
No.
Okay. Tip Johnson, what do you want to say? I'm not running the meeting.
I just want to say that, you know, I worked for a number of years in park planning and writing the grants to get the parks and all that. And I've sat on many a board and committee in this town, and I kind of know how they get entrenched in their own like perspective. And I just want to, although I'm in agreement with what Frank and Bob and Nicole have said, I think that's a great way to go, and I want to support that. I just want to provide kind of an umbrella overlay, which Frank alluded to, is that there's a district full of citizens. And those citizens have roughly 8 million reasons to preserve, restore, and use the forest for education. I just think, I think it's a great idea to really focus right on that, just right on those 8 million reasons.
Thanks, Tip. And John, thanks for asking both Nicole and our other colleague for voicing their concerns, and we Lane and Nicole, we're your partners. We want to support you. We want to bring more resources. We want to bring the community to support not just the Chuckanut Community Forest, but all the parks. And everybody here feels that way. So it does me, my heart good to hear you say what you said, Nicole. Thank you very much. And I think we can all take that as a promise to discuss this further. And we look forward to you coming back. And I know you got to leave at 7 o'clock, and I'm mindful that's 4 minutes from now. We should probably.
What is their next step? What do they want from us right now?
It's a good question, John. Nicole, what can we do to help? We can get a copy of that draft, those draft recommendations to you if you can't find them.
Yes, that would be great. I would like to know how you want to handle the steering committee aspect of a typical project. That was one thing we really talked about. And as a district, you are this board already, but a steering committee meets much more often than once a month. So we'll need either whoever on this board is willing and able to participate in a more meaningful way as we work through this project. It will be longer meetings more often as part of a team.
John McLaughlin is the most informed one about this and should do it, but he has no time. Hugh and John Hymas are taking up with some of their stuff, and Frank is off saving the world in the islands. I guess I have to. I would be glad to be on that if it's possible. I think that perhaps one other person can be on it.
Well, this is the logical person. I'm looking right at her.
So am I.
But we can let us talk about that, Nicole.
You guys talk about it.
We'll definitely recommend some folks to you and some process level stuff too.
And I think what we'll have in the end, will work, because it's also about how it just fits into our system, or we can make this approach work. And I think it actually is a better one. And I think it will be a more meaningful process. And I was having a really hard time with the same thing that you were talking about, Frank, is how we fit all this stuff into one plan. It just wasn't it wasn't working in my head, but we may want to think about how we incorporate some maps that really show the larger area as part of the document, so you can see where it fits. And then I think it will be better. I really feel really good about that idea. I think it's better.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you
I like
so
that.
much, Nicole. I am seldom so pleased in the course of one meeting by the course of it. Thank you so much for listening, Nicole.
Well, I'm gonna tell you one more thing that's really funny is the reason it was the very first city council meeting I ever went to was it was Fairhaven Highlands back then. And that's what got me involved in the Walk and Watch, which got me out of being a paralegal and got me back into grad school and got me working at the city. So it was this property. How about that?
We're lucky for that having happened. Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
And
that was our loss, Nicole.
That was what?
That was our loss at our law firm.
Oh, that's right. I was working for your law firm. That's right. See, Bellingham, it's all these little circles. Great. Well, thanks for your time tonight. And we'll be back. I'm sure we think we'll probably just have a standing. This item will be on your agenda for the rest of the year, I would imagine. So we can bring you up to speed.
Okay. You're stuck with us for a while.
We're going to be
Thank you, Lane.
all right. Thanks very much. Bye.
Cool. I'm going to head out as well. Great to see all of you. Thank you so much for all your feedback.
Coming, Lane.
It's great. Have a good night.
So much, Lane. You bet.
Thank you.
I really meant it when I said seldom have I ever seen that kind of responsiveness from a city agency.
Well, I'm glad that Frank James has calmed down. I thought that Frank presented it very succinctly, and I loved the way that Bob Carmichael weighed in. And
I actually got a call from Gene Commission in the middle of our meeting.
From who?
Gene Knudsen.
Oh,
He's the lead person for the parks and has been a big supporter for a long time. So Gene was incredulous, actually. It isn't what he thought was supposed to happen either. Anyway, I've got to call the mayor and Gene and Michael Lillquist and tell them, no, Lane did the right thing. Not Lane, but Nicole did the right thing here. I was impressed. We have a full agenda and we probably need to wrap this up and move on to the rest of it because we need to get people paid and that sort of thing. Is there more discussion of this agenda item?
Yeah, I've got a quick comment, a quick concern. Greenway's bought a bunch of property for similar reasons before the Chuckanut Forest was bought. And it really seems to me like we ought to fold that in. There's a considerable amount of property there. There's Hoag's Pond, as Hugh mentioned, and there's some other properties that need to be included in this process. They don't have a plan, and it would be great if it all became conservation. I can tell you what's happening in parks in general.
yeah.
If you walk in Watcom Falls Park regularly, you'll see the degradation that's happening to that park. I don't want to see it happening on this piece or the other pieces that we acquired when we were trying to assemble a major Southside park. So I'm wondering if this board will entertain that notion that we expand the borders, not Fairhaven Park, but the conservation area that we started, which is nearly as large, or as I recall, it's over 100 acres. So
we've already started that discussion with the land trust because, of course, they have that critical piece that has the beaver pond in it.
Yes.
So we've already been coordinating with them, and it would be, I think it makes sense from a functional point of view. If the function of those places is conservation, then I could see us expanding our vision to include the places for which conservation is the primary purpose.
great.
That makes great sense, John. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah.
Um,
Except
Yes,
for
ma'am.
this master plan, I'm not sure that we want to mix that in and confuse the issue. But I do want to point out that in the baseline study, there is a map that says ownership map. And it does show City of Bellingham ownership versus Parks Department ownership versus City Finance Department ownership versus parks and private. So yeah, John, there are a lot of parks parcels all around, the other side of the interurban and all. But for this master plan, boy, I hesitate to confuse the issue because our mandate is these 82 acres.
Well,
So I think we
there's a
can.
bigger area there that all needs to go into conservation. If my understanding of the vision that we started on with Greenways a number of years ago, and gosh, the second levy, I think, we started acquiring property that we could afford. And I really think it ought to be included. It doesn't have a master plan. And if we can bring it in somehow and bring it into the fold so that conservation that it not become a park, that it become a conservation area, that would be wonderful.
I think it's a good suggestion. Vince, I want to recognize you have a very valid point. I think John's got a really good suggestion though. If we can, let's hold those in our thinking and see if there's some way to make that coordination happen. And okay.
I know we're not on the trails yet, but one of the reasons I like the express route from Fairhaven Park down to the old Samish for the future pedestrian suspension bridge is that it kind of makes it like you're going through this conservation area, not like using the conservation area. So I know we're not on the trails, but I wanted to plug that again.
Yeah, no, that I understand exactly what you're saying, Tip, and I think that's a valid issue. If we've had a full enough discussion of that for now, I would recommend that we move on our agenda. We're going to be here till midnight. which I'm not a big fan of.
I just want to say one thing here about the stuff that she had written up about the site inventory and the adjacent land uses, the neighbors, the zoning, etc., the new density up on Viewcrest there, all that kind of stuff should be remarked upon in the document, I think, because as things densify, the impacts on the forest will increase if not done, planned properly. And I was also thinking that maybe the fire department should weigh in with a little bit of a forest fire plan.
That certainly has been an issue over in the parts that were being slated for this one on Viewcrest. There were 2 forest fires there that, had they not been controlled by the local city, they probably burnt down most of Edgemore.
Yeah.
But that's a valid point. And the city crew came out and put it out once and it blew right back up. And it wasn't until the actual wildland fire guys showed up that we were able to control the fire. At any rate, good point. Any further discussion? We did not yet have our public comment period formally, but I would like to open the public comment period, asking people to keep their remarks to 3 minutes. Anybody like to comment? I'm grateful there is none. We'll move on. Thank you very much. We need to approve our minutes of January 24th, 2021.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes. I've looked over them. Maybe somebody wants to discuss them, but I would like to make a motion that we approve them.
So there's a motion. Do I hear a second?
I made one point there I didn't see in the minutes, but I'll just make it again, and it doesn't have to be in the minutes really, but I was saying that the Zoom idea is a big energy saver for the average citizen, and I think in the future we should keep Zoom as one method to attend meetings and comment and such. And I was kind of, John Cervase's idea kind of brought that up when he was speaking but I didn't bring it up right then because you guys were talking about something else and I didn't get a chance.
I like that idea.
Right.
I think that was in the earlier minutes, or should have been in the earlier minutes, because it was commented on in the meeting in that fashion.
Yeah.
Any other comments or discussion? Theoretically, we need a second to discuss it, but we've discussed it. Do I hear a second for adopting the minutes?
I'll second to adopt.
So moved by Brown and seconded by Beatty to adopt the minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
John, I must wake up. Say
John,
aye.
can you vote on this? You either have to raise your hand or get off mute and speak up. Ray raises his hand. Okay, it passes unanimously.
Frank, may I say that respecting this old business, because it is turning into a long meeting, that a number of these items we really can't discuss very intelligently or as an informed way without John McLaughlin around. And I wonder if we might quickly table some of those and move to the question of money that we have to pay.
So I believe that the discussion of the trail plan and evaluation criteria potential for a hearing in March. Why don't we go ahead and say we'll do that in March? I believe John was friendly towards that. Restoration process and potential public hearing in May or June. I think John is also agreeable with that. And in basis 2 weeks, his meeting in March sometime with the listed invitees to that. That would be our and then we've already we already are hopefully posting these. Let's take those 3. So do those timelines sound right to everybody? I think that's what we'd had agreement with John on, and John's going to be the lead on most of that.
Yes.
So why
Sound fine.
Could we, I'd love to hear a motion that we adopt those dates, March, May or June and March as a formal request, and forward that to John McLaughlin for his leadership on. How's that sound?
So moved. I make a motion that we adopt those dates.
Second?
Hugh said yes.
Hugh, thank you, Hugh. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? If there's-
Aye.
Could I say something first?
Yes, Robin.
I just wanted to point out that we have three things that could take a fair amount of time set up for the next meeting, which would be Nicole and Lane coming back to talk about the master plan, talk about the criteria for evaluating the trails, and the invasive species meeting. And I'm just wondering if you want to do all three of those at the same meeting.
I would suggest we move the invasive species discussion to April.
So moved. All right, I make a motion that we move that to April.
Right.
So March.
I'll second that.
So March for trails, May for restorative processes and potential public hearing, and then April for the invasive species. Is that so moved and seconded? Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. John, did you vote? John Hymas? Yes, he did. So that's unanimous. Moving on to updated on posting recordings of the meetings. Robin?
I put that in there sort of as a placeholder because I was communicating with our John King about if there was going to be any problem with putting that stuff on the website, and he talked me through how to do that. So I'm going to put it up there. I allowed myself 2 days after the meeting to get it up there. So in case we have any problems with it, but so that's why I put that in there.
And so
Okay.
that's the informational, just telling us you're going to do it, and congratulations and thank you for doing it and solving those problems. The interlocal agreement on payroll services, we need to update it and an approved agreement.
We're still waiting on that agreement from Whatcom County.
So that too is informational. We got
Yes,
our
and I
part.
wasn't sure if we were going to have it or not. So that's again why I put it on there. So yeah.
So we'll trust them to continue to do it for now until we hear otherwise from them. I expect it's going to happen and it'll be fine.
Yeah,
Further
Catherine
discussion?
is working on that.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just housekeeping to get the agreement updated, and we'll get it when we get it. But in the meantime, the county will continue to perform all the functions that they have been for us as treasurer.
Thank you very much. New business, letter of appreciation from Fairhaven neighbors. Robin, do you want to share that with us or tell us about it?
Yeah, I did send it out to everybody. If you want, it's not real long. I can read it very quickly. It just says,
Yeah.
"Dear commissioners past and present, the Fairhaven Neighbors Board of Directors would like to thank all of you for your service and creation of the legal structure and your follow through in making the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District a reality. Your dedication completes the commitments and decades of work by so many citizens, ensuring that the entirety of the property is protected in public ownership in perpetuity with respect for its ecological, recreational, educational functions." And we gratefully acknowledge your service, which includes advocacy and collaborative cooperation with the legal department of the city of Bellingham and the Whatcom County Treasurer. Anyway, I just wanted to put that in there. I can also post it on the website, but
Thank you
I
very
just
much.
wanted to
Thank
acknowledge it.
Thank you very much. And Vince, I'm glad you're here to hear that, and you too, John Blessing, because you
Yeah.
guys are part of the team. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did not help write that letter, but I am on that board in full disclosure, but I was not behind writing it. And I recused myself from approving it.
That's totally
We
fine.
believe you.
Because it's largely directed at your efforts. You and John deserve as much credit as anybody sitting in the other chairs tonight. So thank you very much. And thanks for reading that. The monthly expenses and cash flow sheets, petty cash in our WECU account, $2,967.11. Treasurer's report, I'll just quickly go over this. Unencumbered cash balance as of 1/1 was $229,859. Ending unencumbered balance as of 1/31, $226,977. tax revenues of $1,176 in January. We paid out $873 in operating expenses and $3,184 paid on our loan to the city of Bellingham. Current debt and outstanding balance as of 1/31/2020 was, is that 2021?
Yes, sorry about that. I thought I caught all those, but I missed one.
1/31/2021 as now corrected, $648,259. Do we have a motion to approve the district payroll input form wages for Robin Albro of $20.25, 20 and a quarter hours in January, with a total gross of $506.25.
I
Do I hear a motion?
make a motion that we approve of that payroll.
John Brown,
Second.
John Brown and Hugh Beatty. Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Consent agenda. These are the items that should be routine. If there's any questions, please stop me and we can do it. Invoice 93816 from Carmichael and Clark for $146.50 for regular professional services. Invoice 93817 from Carmichael and Clark for $4,901 for the Horowitz Public Records request. Bob had told us it would be a more substantial amount coming forward. This is it. Payment of invoice 65882963 from Robin Albo for Zoom membership for the next year, $118.27.
I make a motion that we approve of these amounts and pay them.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? Passes unanimously. Robin Albro, as a reminder, will send 3 board members, me, John Hymas, and Hugh Beatty, and we will respond by confirming and approving and paying the bills as a way to process this business-wise out in the form of this Zoom meeting with written confirmation by email. Next meeting will be March 24th, 2021. Is there any other items for discussion this evening?
I think there is one, at least one thing. So originally we have on the agenda to make a motion about the naming. That was in response to the concern about the name of the park. We didn't do that. We don't have to do that, but that was written as a motion. It's on page 1 right after the master plan discussion with Nicole. The thing that I do want to make sure you at least consider tonight, if you want to bump it off till the next meeting, that's fine. But we did hear a request for participation on the steering committee. So that steering committee for the park master plan is going to be an important committee. My recommendation is that there be 2 members of this body on that steering committee, because I think we need continuity. In case one member can't be there, we'll likely have at least one, the other member will be, and it'll just be better to have 2 involved, and then that committee can be coordinating with the rest of the board. But I do think we need to talk about that and who's going to do that.
Sure. So let's take the first one first. And you are correct. I did not bring that forward, and I should have. The Chuckanut Community Forces naming process. We were going to make a formal recommendation. It's listed on the agenda. Discussion naming process, or CCF motion. We, the board of Chuckanut Community Forest Park District, request that the directors of Bellingham Parks and Recreation Department undertake a park naming process for the Chuckanut Community Forest Park District per policy PAR 010001. Naming of parks, recreation areas, and facilities as part of the master planning process. We requested a naming topic be the subject of public meeting held as part of the park master planning process. Bob had recommended to us earlier that we send that request to the city formally. If someone would like to move that formally, I'd be happy to entertain that motion.
why do we have to send a request is my question. Wouldn't that naturally be part of this,
To
of the
make sure
discussion
that
of
it
the
happens.
steering committee?
I think the discussion was to ensure that it actually happens.
Okay. I make a motion that we include that.
A second,
However,
I'll second it.
moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
I'm happy to be on this steering committee. I don't want to jump the gun. It just seems to me that John Hymas has done an awful lot, that John McLaughlin's always busy, that Frank's busy, and that Hugh you might not want to be part of it. And I was wondering if I'm part of it, I'm happy to defer to someone else who wants to be part of it. But if I'm part of it and John McLaughlin can't be part of it, and he's got the brains, a lot of the brains in this outfit, I'm wondering if Vince Bachunas could be designated as a possible member of the steering committee. Is that possible
No,
as an
John,
emeritus member?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Vince, you have probably the most detailed knowledge of how this all came down and what actually happened more than anybody else. If you wanted to be a member representing our interests, I would consider that a very friendly thing to do. If you were able to do that.
I think I am able to do it, but I don't think I would be as a commissioner. So I think we still need, I would be a member of the public.
Okay. So John,
I don't know. I mean, it would be confusing if I was representing commissioners.
So I'm happy to be the backup for you, John. When John Brown, if you can't go, I'll go, okay?
I mean, they
So
might
so
set up
Vincent and I would
daytime.
Vincent and I would go to the meetings. Vincent and I would go to the meetings, and we keep you informed when you could come, you would.
Yeah, if you and I can be the official people and Vincent comes as a citizen, I think that's a great
I
balance.
think I would have to be a citizen with maybe some historical background, but
I don't believe that, Vince. I think that this board could designate you as a person that we have chosen.
Ex officio. Yeah.
But John, I think process-wise, if you and I do it and Vincent shows up, that's a great thing. I think
Okay.
we got what we need. There.
Hugh might want to say something too.
Yeah, Hugh, do you want
I
to?
was gonna say, I don't drive anymore, so I don't steer very well, but I'm home all the time and I could certainly tap into a meeting anytime, usually.
Okay.
And I haven't gone anywhere.
Okay, this doesn't have to be decided right away. Mr. Carmichael wants to talk.
Bob?
Thank you. Yes. So I just want to remind the board that regardless of whether you're appointed or not, we can't have more than 2 active board members at steering committee. Otherwise, it becomes an official meeting of the park district. So Hugh, if you want to participate online and Frank and John are already there, then you could sit back as a member of the public, but you couldn't really participate. So we do need to figure that part of it out. We only can have 2 members. And I do think we should appoint 2 and maybe 1 alternate, maybe 2 members and 1 alternate. And then I actually agree with John Brown. I think that the board could appoint Vinca as a honorary emeritus to represent the district on this steering committee. Legally, that could happen. And it's not a problem for the having 3 members then, because we could have 2 board members plus Vinca. So even better representation at the steering committee, which I know it's a time commitment. It sounds like it's, a meeting at least every other week or so from what I heard. So it's a time commitment. We probably do want to have alternates, and I think appointing Vinca as an emeritus member is a great idea.
I make a motion that we make Vincent an emeritus member.
Vincent,
board.
that's contingent upon your approval. Maybe.
Okay, I can do it. I'm pretty sure I can make most days.
All right. I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Vinca, you're there. And then John Brown and I, we're the main members? And Hugh,
Yeah.
you wanna be our tough guy in the back in the dark that comes out with a club and hits people when it's necessary?
Are you talking to whom?
Hugh,
Me?
I can be your alternate, like if one of you can't make it, just let me know and I'll tune
Okay.
in.
awesome.
Could do-
So we have a slate of candidates. Any further discussion? Is there a, shall we vote on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Hamish, you're being quiet because you don't want to get fingered on this, aren't you? Okay, I'll say aye.
Didn't you hear me?
I didn't, no.
Am I muted?
No,
No,
you're
you're
not.
there.
I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Now, what else do we need to do?
Well,
Can
just
I
someone
ask a
needs to let,
question of,
I'm sorry.
oh, no, this could be a discussion outside of this meeting, but I wanted to ask John Bluthen to maybe pull up a list of the properties that you're thinking of so that the steering committee has that data for your
I think
idea.
I think that's pretty easy to do. Parks has got a list of the properties. And what we need to do is to push for a larger umbrella than just this property, because there's another 100 acres or so.
Yeah,
That could all be conservation. And if we can get it under the umbrella now, then it'll be hard to reverse it and turn it into a park or some other entity. That worries me.
yeah,
That wasn't our intent. I do plan on applying to be on this committee for parks. And I think there's a couple of really knowledgeable people in greenways that are sympathetic. And I think we can really pull off a powerful steering committee for this.
yeah. If that suggestion comes from Greenways instead of this committee, this commission, it might even be
Yes,
better.
it could come. I could bring it up with Darla and get it to the Greenways committee that be included.
Cool.
That might be a good way to approach it.
Yeah.
Wow.
What I don't want to see it dilute what you people have in place. What I want to do is to strengthen what is not very strong at this point. It's just kind of open space, and open space to parks is dangerous because they want to paint it in with something like playgrounds and parking lots.
Tennis courts. Yeah.
Sorry, that's me being negative, but
Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to say was I think someone should let Nicole know that we've made these appointments of John Brown and Frank James to the steering committee with Hugh Beatty as alternate, and that Vince has been appointed also as an emeritus member to represent or to be the voice of the park, a citizen voice of the park district.
I'll call her tomorrow.
That's great. Thank you.
As a footnote, I just got a very supportive text message from Seth Fleetwood saying he would speak with the Parks Department about it. And I responded to him that we had a good discussion with Nicole and we mutually agreed on an acceptable plan for moving forward together. And I complimented her on her flexibility and responsiveness. So I closed the loop with Seth. I'll close it with Jean too on the phone, and I'll try to get a hold of Michael as well.
Thank you, Frank.
I think we've got a process going forward that's effective.
Excellent.
Hey.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Good job, Frank. Good night.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.
We're gonna get this done yet.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good
everybody.
night.
Thanks, John.
Good to
Good
see
night.
you
Bye-bye.
all.
Night, Bob.
Bye.
Bye,
Good
Bob.
night.
Night, Robin. We'll get the email to you as soon as we get it, Robin.
Hey.
Thank you.